Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome back, everybody. All right. I have a long one here and lots of audio clips to play and much analysis as well. So let's get right to it here. First of all, briefly saw One America News the other day. They are all in for Israel, in case anybody was curious. They were interviewing one of their Israeli ambassadors, and they were all in agreement on One America News. So if you thought One America News was somehow an independent news outlet and they were against the establishment, make no mistake, they are the establishment. They're all in. Wouldn't be surprised if Right Side Broadcasting was the same way, and of course we know Real America's Voice is too. No one's really being objective about any of this, are they? I mean, no one is really paying attention to what's really happening. They're glossing over, if not even covering the fact that it was probably a week or so ago, if not almost 2 weeks, when a hospital in Gaza was completely destroyed, and then they found mass graves where the individuals inside of the mass graves, being Palestinians, were bound and tortured. And that this had happened after the so-called IDF occupation. So these were IDF soldiers detaining individuals and then executing them and then burying them in a mass grave to then, of course, bowl over a hospital. And then this mass grave, again, was apparently dug up either by them or by someone else, and then there you have it. And what was their explanation, again, over a week ago? Well, war is hard. War is just a difficult thing. Again, this is astounding. And believe me, when it comes to the business of education here and the education stories I have to bring up for this episode, you're not going to believe what Congress is actually suggesting. It really is next level brainwashing, next level stupid. In fact, it's so absurd, I can't even believe they're saying it, but they're saying it. And it should just prove to more people how blackmailed these individuals are. And it's all of them in Congress. It's all of them in the Senate. It's everybody. It blows me away. We are completely occupied. There's no doubt about it. There was also this. Again, just sort of easing into the education subject here. I don't have much geopolitical beyond that, although it's kind of all the same if you certainly think about it. Miguel Cardona, the Department of Education Secretary, was testifying in front of Congress the other day. I'm not sure how long, but the questions were repetitive, and I watched a few of the back and forth from both sides of the proverbial aisle, and it was basically just all about loans and loan forgiveness, and, what is a viable loan, Mr. Secretary, and should students have their loans forgiven? And if a student takes out a loan, shouldn't they have to pay it back? I mean, it was one question after another that was all the same, and his answers were all the same. Well, if there's fraud involved, then that depends, and then he'd get interrupted. And I'm not defending him by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, he's part of the problem. He too is blackmailed. He too is owned. He checks all the boxes for those in charge of the Department of Ed and, of course, all the politicians in Congress. But it just didn't seem like a very worthwhile testimony of any kind. Again, they drug him in there just to talk about the student loan forgiveness and who's going to receive this, and then, of course, slap him around a little bit about how taxpayers are going to have to pay for it and so on and so on. But no one's really doing anything to stop it. Again, on either side of the aisle. They're the so-called Republicans, or conservatives as they like to be called, would lead people to believe that they're going to do something about it, when in fact they won't. They're using these arguments in these congressional hearings as more, ammunition, so to speak, for any upcoming election that they may be in. And they'll say, well, see, I gave it to the old Secretary of Education, and I gave him the what for. The fact is they're not going to accomplish anything. The entire thing is unlawful. The Supreme Court said so. And I guess the fake Biden administration is still just running through the motions as if all of this is legit. So, I don't know what to make of it. I really don't. I don't understand the heads or tails of it. But the whole thing, of course, is beyond illegal, seems completely shady. And everybody's basically just, I don't know, playing catch with the entire issue, and they're not really getting down to brass tacks. So, that begs the question, when the Supreme Court makes a ruling and says, no, students have to pay back their loans because it's a legal document, and that's what that means. And then a president comes in and says, loans are forgiven. We're going to push this on the everyday taxpayer. I mean, who enforces that law then? Who enforces the law that's been in place by the Supreme Court? My understanding, it's supposed to be the Department of Justice. But when the Department of Justice is owned and operated, allegedly, by the fake Biden administration, well, then what's going to happen then? It appears nothing. So, it's unfortunate, but that's certainly the current state of affairs regarding all of that. Not to mention, I fully understand that a lot of the student loan forgiveness business had to do with individuals who have been paying loans for something like 20 plus years and over and are still paying loans to this day, and that those loans are going to be the ones forgiven. Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, it really doesn't matter. Individuals who paid out of pocket are still in debt for attending graduate school or attending undergrad or whatever it may be, private schools, you name it, including families themselves. Maybe they threw it on a credit card, but their loans aren't forgiven because they didn't use government, so to speak, to pay for their schooling. They threw their tuition on a credit card, or they paid as they went. So they're being penalized for doing the right thing, but the individuals who also, again, went through the loan process, well, they're just forgiven, and because they've had a loan for X amount of years, then it just moves its way to the taxpayer, which again is almost like being taxed twice if you're an individual who just decided to pay for school another way. So I don't know. Again, something has to give here. There's just no doubt about it. There was also this came from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and they tossed their controversial diversity statement hiring requirement, becoming the first elite U.S. university to throw away the practice, claiming that they don't work. No kidding. This, as you might recall, was a part of the application process, almost like a cover letter, where beyond your cover letter and your CV and references and letters of reference and maybe a writing sample, whatever it is that they wanted individuals to send in, you also had to fill out this diversity statement, claiming what your beliefs are in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what can you offer to the university, and so on and so on. I will be honest with you, though, I would pay literal money to actually get my hands on some of those actual diversity statements that were written by those whack jobs who were applying for those positions. I would love to get my hands on those, and I would love to read those on the show. And that could be a very basic internet search. I don't know. Again, I'm assuming that a lot of that's confidential because you're talking about a potential employee sending it to an employer, and the employer usually doesn't make those public. Again, that's usually confidential information, but wow, wouldn't that be fun to read through? I really do think it would be funny. It would be absolutely hilarious. Again, these individuals writing these massive statements about how serious they think it is and what they bring to the table and what can't exist and what should exist and blah, blah, blah. I mean, man, you talk about head cases. That would be funny to read. So I don't know. I'll bounce around the old interweb and see if I can't find any. But if you're out there and you're listening to this, feel free and email me one of those kinds of letters. If you can get your hands on a college or university diversity, equity, and inclusion statement from a potential employee to their employer, that would be golden. I would get a kick out of reading one of those on the show. I really would. Man, you talk about messed up. Okay, let me move on to this now. This was kind of funny too, and a bit of a victory. This is from WND.com, and it was titled Expelled Students Win $1 million for Blackface That Wasn't Blackface. It says, verdict puts schools on notice to provide fair procedures in disciplinary actions. I want to read this in its entirety. Here we go. It says an announcement from a prominent legal team reveals that a $1 million verdict in a fight over an alleged wrongful expulsion of two students from St. Francis High School in California means that schools are now on notice to provide fair procedures to students in disciplinary actions. Quote, the case is significant not only for our clients, but its groundbreaking effect on all private high schools in California, which are now legally required to provide fair procedure to students before punishing or expelling them. And that was from a Krista Bowman of the Dillon Law Group that fought the case. It goes on, it says, the jury rightfully confirmed that St. Francis High School's procedures were unfair to our clients and that school is not above the law. The fight had an odd origination, it says. The legal team said that two students, in solidarity with a friend who was instructed by a doctor to use an acne-fighting face mask, also wore the medication. A photograph was taken, then several years later surfaced, and school officials charged they were in blackface. It says the legal team noted that the students who were minors at the time became the center of controversy due to a photograph of them wearing green acne face masks. The photo, which was taken 3 years earlier, was misrepresented by the school as blackface in June of 2020, amidst heightened racial tensions and unrelated racist incidents within the school community. St. Francis expelled the boys within 24 hours without considering their evidence or offering any hearing. Again, side note here, this is the mind frame of the people who work within the business. They shoot first, they ask questions later, they say they didn't do anything wrong, they get sent to court because they did everything wrong, they lose, and then they won't change their ways. Legal proceeding or not, legal result, judicial result, the verdict's in, the whole thing. Precedent's been set, XYZ. It won't matter. These individuals, it's in their DNA. It's why they hold the positions they hold. They always shoot first and ask questions later because it's image protection. What they don't understand is that getting things wrong out of the gate always backs up on them one way or another. And that's even worse. But they don't understand that that's not good image protection. Just image protection is just being honest. But they just refuse to do that. It's astounding. It goes on here. It says the Dillon team, the legal team, explained that protections previously offered to the university students in the state now, because of the precedent, are required for high school students. Quote, the jury's verdict finally cleared our clients' names after 4 long years of repeated personal attacks from St. Francis High School. So the school didn't let up. They made the allegations, they kicked them out, and then they kept going after these people. It says schools are supposed to protect and nurture children, not sacrifice them when it is convenient for public relations purposes. No kidding, said Dillon Law Group counsel Karen Swigert. It says the students have been identified in reports only as HH and AH. The dispute developed just as the nation was in an uproar, and charges of racism were everywhere following the death of George Floyd, where he swallowed a bag full of fentanyl, and that's what killed him. I added that part because it's true. Moving on, it says the school initially told the family's lawyers, quote, your clients or their friends are responsible for the posting of the photograph on social media and the resultant publicity and unfortunate consequences. That's funny. It says the boys' family in a statement said that the fight was over the school's assumption of their guilt, quote, without giving a child the opportunity to show their innocence. That's called due process. There you go. And that doesn't exist in American schools, I assure you. I, too, know very well, personally, that that is the case. They don't care about due process in the slightest. It goes on, it says, quote, we would never wish the pain, humiliation, and suffering St. Francis has inflicted on our families on anyone, but we are thankful that the jury has spoken and vindicated our boys and forced St. Francis to finally take responsibility for their repeated personal attacks on the boys, unquote. That's great. Now leave the private school, leave that school permanently and bankrupt them. Again, they have an insurance policy for things like this. The insurance company probably pays out the claim. It's $1 million. Again, I don't know if it was $1 million for each student or how it was divvied up, but either way, you bankrupt these schools by leaving them, public, private, or charter. When they do a thing that is illegal and or wrong to a singular student or a group of students, you vote with your feet and you leave. And you do it the first time they do it. Because the first time they do it, well, let's face it, it would never really be the first time. The people who run these buildings come from other places where they've done other horrible things. They pass the trash constantly, even in the private school area. So once they all end up doing a bad thing within said area, and you happen to be a witness to it, it doesn't mean that you're a victim of it directly, but if you're a witness to it, you've got to go. Find another place. It just blows me away because, again, the individuals who continue to return are the ones sending the terrible message to the school. They're sending the message, yes, we know what you did, but don't worry, we stand with you, and you did what you think you had to do. And I mean, the only people who probably attend that school now are hardened leftists who are still offended, even though the thing that they were offended by isn't real. Again, that's the level of brainwashing going on here. It is next level. Now there's this story. This is from the United States Attorney's Office, the District of the Virgin Islands. This was back on April 26th, and I came across this. In fact, this was tossed to me by a family member, so shout out to them. This was titled, Former High School Coach Sentenced to 35 Years on Child Exploitation Conviction. Allow me to read this whole statement from the U.S. State's Attorney's Office out of the Virgin Islands. Again, make no mistake, school employees, as we know, are involved in child trafficking and sexual abuse. This is a constant. If you've ever watched Sheriff Grady Judd in Polk County, Florida, he has YouTube videos constantly. He brings a lot of the arrests, regardless of the kind of arrest, to the public forum so people can understand exactly what's going on. And I like that about him. Again, a lot of people think he's an attention whore, and a lot of people think that he just does these, makes these public statements on video to draw attention to himself. But the people need to know because, again, then people don't buy newspapers and people are busy with their lives and they're doing other things. So I like what Grady Judd does. But with that said, it would be nice if more people kind of did what he's doing in Polk County, Florida, in other parts of the United States, and in this particular case, of course, the Virgin Islands. But either way, here's this particular statement from, again, the U.S. Attorney's Office. It says, St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. United States Attorney Delia L. Smith announced today that Chief Judge Robert A. Malloy sentenced Alfredo Bruce Smith, 53, of St. Thomas, to 35 years in prison, followed by a lifetime of supervised release. Upon release from prison, Smith must register as a sex offender. On September 13th of 2023, Smith pled guilty to a 20-count indictment charging him with both federal and territorial child sexual exploitation offenses. Quote, one of our greatest responsibilities is to protect our children, and we will continue to target child predators who sexually abuse them. This case is particularly egregious because Smith used his position of trust to victimize students over a period spanning 15 years. I'm grateful to all of those who worked tirelessly to bring this case to justice for the minor victims who were abused by this defendant, United States Attorney Smith said. Okay, first of all, side note. Remarkably hypocritical statement there by the prosecutor. Jeffrey Epstein, hello. I mean, what about all of his clients? Why are we not going after them? Is it because they're in the media and they're politicians and 1,000 other things? I mean, if we care about children, let's go after the customers, shall we? Not to mention in this particular case regarding this school employee, 15 years of abuse. You couldn't catch him after year one? Couldn't catch him after the first time? Why 15 years? It goes on here. It says, quote, or they said, quote, the prosecutor apparently said, quote, the special agent said, quote, "This case is a reminder of the inherent dangers the children of our community face every day. We must all work together as a community to report individuals committing these crimes. Homeland Security Investigators is steadfast in its commitment to investigate and pursue justice for those who misuse their positions of trust to sexually abuse our children," unquote. Homeland Security Investigations Special Agent in Charge Rebecca Gonzalez Ramos said. Again, I'm having endless flashbacks right now because the hypocrisy of these bureaucratic statements that they make are over-flippin'-whelming. They're overwhelming. You've heard me bring up locally in the school district where I am, a middle school business teacher sexually assaulted a teenage girl who was in his class by grabbing her on the breasts, and he was allowed to resign after a district investigation where clearly he was found to be guilty of serious crimes. And then, once brought to the county prosecutor, the county didn't even prosecute him with any crime. Wrap your head around that. Now, yeah, he lost his teaching license in Ohio, and he'll never teach again. But ladies and gentlemen, there's a sexual predator on the loose who's never been convicted of a sexual crime. And he did it before, if I didn't say that earlier. I mean, he had done this before, and the school hid it before. So it's these kinds of bureaucratic statements that drive me up the wall, and I could spend a whole episode just yelling into the microphone about it, but, I mean, this is the problem. Every single time a person is accused of sexually assaulting someone, or again, coercing or grooming, sexual grooming, I mean, whatever variation of pedophilia or sexual assault you want to put it on the spectrum, they need to be fully investigated with numerous testimonies on the record, numerous reports, any video footage, XYZ, and then you label the person and convict them as an actual sexual predator. That's my 2 cents. Now, as you might imagine, my other 2 cents on the issue is bullets are a whole lot cheaper. Because you can't fix pedophilia, and you can't fix sexual crime. It's in those people. That's how they operate. So, put them down. There are foreign countries that do, which is fantastic. Let's bring that back to the United States, can we? But again, letting these individuals go free to then only potentially work in another environment where they're going to take advantage of someone else, this is a massive problem. And this goes on in numerous school districts all across the United States, if not all of them. Certainly here in the Virgin Islands in this particular case. Here's some more specifics here. It says, according to court documents, Smith was employed as a hall monitor and track and field coach at the Charlotte Amalie High School, if I'm saying that right, in St. Thomas from 2006 to 2021. During his tenure at the school, Smith sexually assaulted and exploited multiple male students who attended the school. Smith's crimes were revealed in 2019 after he sexually assaulted a minor male student during a track and field meet in Puerto Rico. The victim reported to law enforcement that Smith forced him and other minor male students to engage in sexual intercourse and sodomy both on and off school campus, and that Smith used his cell phone to record himself and the minor male victims engaging in sexual acts and pornography. Again, I can't put myself in that situation, but how on earth does a high school student, or is a high school student, forced into sexual intercourse and sodomy if they also aren't being kidnapped and tied down? I mean, I don't understand it. Don't you just get up and leave? Do you scream? Don't you scream for help? Don't you beat the person up and then go to the police and say they tried to sexually assault us and sodomize us? I mean, I don't know what's going on here, but yeah, who's to know? It could be, well, I could speculate, but I'll just keep going here. It says court documents further revealed that Smith's Facebook account contained a large quantity of sexually explicit material, including videos of sexual activities between Smith and the minor male victims, recorded in different locations in St. Thomas. When Smith was arrested on September 1st of 2021, law enforcement seized a laptop, a camcorder, and 5 cellular phones, which contained a large quantity of videos and photographs, containing child pornography. It says Smith used his position as hall monitor to remove minor male students from their classrooms during and after school hours to sexually abuse them in empty classrooms and offices on the school's campus, it said. In fact, Smith's office, where most of the sexual abuse took place, was next door to the principal's office. Well, isn't that interesting? Who's interested in image protection more than anybody else in a school building? The principal. And these abuses happen to just occur right next to their office. What a coincidence. Unbelievable. But it's not. This is par for the course, ladies and gentlemen. This is what people don't get. See, they'll read this and they'll rationalize this a million ways, or they'll hear what I'm saying here and rationalize it 1,000 ways. They'll say, well, I don't live in the Virgin Islands, and I pay attention to where my kid goes all the time, and our principal would never do that, and that doesn't happen in our building. You don't know that. You don't know that. And you don't know what's in the minds of the people who work in these buildings. This is amazing. It says Smith also used the school's official vehicle and camcorder to transport the minor male students and record the sexual abuse at various locations in St. Thomas. Make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, there were endless school employees who knew that this was happening, and they said nothing. And as far as I'm concerned, they should be put down right next to the sexual predator himself. All of them. Round them all up and put them all down. Real simple. There's no way a singular individual in a high school building gets away with this for as long as they did without endless people in the building knowing about it, including the district office. I don't buy it for a second. It wraps up here. It says, at sentencing, Chief Judge Malloy told Smith that, quote, Charlotte Amalie High School, during those 15 years was your playground to molest those children. School is supposed to be a safe haven like their home, not a place that cases trauma and pain. It says Malloy further stated that, quote, if it were not for the coverage of the children who reported these atrocities, we would not know what happened. Well, on the contrary, you should know what happened because there were probably staff members who knew what was going on and they were keeping their mouths closed because they were concerned about the loss of their job. That's why. And they just went about their normal days thinking that his odd behavior or suspicious behavior would just go away. I don't buy any of this from it's just the kid's responsibility to tell people and they're the only ones that can tell. Someone else saw something going on here. Somebody else did. And maybe those people moved and they got another job some other place because they didn't want to report it. But hey, you're just as guilty as the predator themselves because you're leaving children with a predator. So again, what does that make you? Again, you talk about a real pandemic, ladies and gentlemen. This is a real one. This is one that goes on in school districts all across the world. Public, private, charter doesn't matter. Everywhere. Okay, deep breath here. Let's shift gears slightly, but we're still in the education realm. This is what I mentioned earlier about I can't believe that this is actually happening nor being suggested by Congress regarding students protesting in the United States on college and university campuses. There are lots of punishments for those who are vandalizing. But protesting carrying a sign, standing on public property, and engaging in your First Amendment to free speech and free expression, okay, that's lawful. That's constitutional law, and that has to remain. Now, I want to make a clear distinction here, too. I'm not talking about the rainbow flag wearing and waving weirdos, rather, who, whip out their genitals during the month of June during a parade and think that that's okay. Those people should be put down also. I'm talking about, again, we all know what lawful protesting looks like. In fact, let me give you a quick reminder of what it looks like and how easy it is to do. Back in, I want to say it would have been the first day of school either in 2020 or the first day of school of 2021, both of my parents on separate locations. My mom went to the elementary school in town and my dad went to the high school in town. They were the only ones to do this on the first day of school. And they both had signs in their hands that they made. And I forget exactly what they said. But my dad was advocating for homeschooling on one. My mom was doing the same. I think they had a Becca.com written on the bottom. But they also had at the top, no shots, no masks, homeschool now. Something like that. They were purposefully standing on public property, on the sidewalk, and they were approached by police, and they were just like, we just wanted to let you know you're doing, you're in a lawful position and you can keep doing what you're doing, so have a nice day. And they were like, yeah, we know. And again, they were on two separate school grounds and they knew what they were doing. That's a good thing, and that's being lawful. Of course, breaking into a university building and barricading the doors and smashing the windows and setting off smoke bombs and the whole thing, well, those people should be arrested because that's not protesting. That's a small riot of some kind. That's confiscation of private property. So, with all of that said, Congress's actual proposal here, and I can't even believe this is real, is to actually have quote-unquote college anti-Israel agitators potentially be sent to Gaza under one of their now House GOP bills. So, again, their solution to people lawfully protesting, even if they're illegally protesting in the United States, the laws of the United States still apply to them, which again means that they should be fined, they should go to jail, they should engage in community service, and then, of course, pay back the damages and so on and so on. That's what should happen because common sense dictates that, as does the law. Unfortunately, discretion gets used in the judicial system, and that might not be the case. But either way, Congress's so-called solution here is to deport these individuals and or forcibly send them literally into a slaughterhouse overseas, where an actual genocide is taking place that Congress is sanctioning. I can't believe this is even being suggested. Now, I'll tell you, I don't care where somebody sits on the so-called proverbial political aisle or spectrum. This is absurd. This isn't even funny. I mean, I'm smiling as I'm saying it, but it's not even funny. It's outrageous. This is outrageous. So again, here's the headline from Fox News, and I'm going to read through this, and then I'm going to play some audio from one of my least favorite senators, Josh Hawley. And he's actually implying that this is what should happen. And he made this implication in the Senate earlier this week. So the headline from Fox News is, college anti-Israel agitators could be sent to Gaza under new House GOP bill. And it says, quote, I am going to bet that these pro-Hamas supporters wouldn't last a day, but let's give them the opportunity, says Representative Randy Weber. Again, he's not joking. I think he's being serious. It says the following, quote, a new House Republican bill would send any person charged and convicted for illegal activity on a college campus to Gaza for at least 6 months. I'm so sorry. Now I'm laughing. I can't believe this is real. Is this really happening? To send them to Gaza for 6 months? There is no more Gaza. It's gone. It's been carpet bombed by the IDF and funded by us. So what are they going to go to? They're going to be target practice for the IDF. And Congress doesn't seem to have a problem with this. Ladies and gentlemen, they're doing this to American citizens. They're attempting to normalize sending an American citizen to a foreign country that's been decimated and genocided out of existence to roam around. Oh, hell. What is the movie? There have been numerous movies made about this, where basically you're all alone, either in the woods or, on some foreign battleground that no longer is a battleground but isn't inhabited by anybody. There was an old Ray Liotta movie called Escape. That was one of them, where they dump all the prisoners on a particular island and they basically just make them fight it out and survive and see what happens. That's basically what they're, it's essentially what they're proposing here. And they think this is okay. It says Representative Andy Ogles, a Republican out of Tennessee, introduced the bill on Wednesday alongside Representatives Randy Weber of Texas, Republican, Jeff Duncan, Republican of South Carolina, in response to the ongoing anti-Israel demonstrations on college campuses across the country. Several of those protests have turned violent with clashes between police and activists, and hundreds have been arrested across blah, 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 blah. Okay. It says, while Ogles' bill text does not mention Israel or the anti-Israel groups, it specifically targets unlawful activity on college campuses after October 7th of 2023, when Hamas militants invaded and blah, blah, blah. It says those convicted would be forced to serve a minimum 6-month community service sentence in Gaza. Oh, it's community service. So you have to pick up dead people and put them in trash bags? Is that what you're supposed to do? Move the concrete of the homes of the dead that you've destroyed and just kind of clean up the area so that Israel can get more land and help renovate the land that they've stolen? This is astounding to me. And the fact that this is even being considered to be a normal train of thought should show people how blackmailed these people are, how insane these people are, how jabbed they may be, prion disease and all. But this is next level nuts. It says, oh my God, here, let me see. Where Israel is currently waging a brutal campaign to eradicate Hamas and rescue the remaining Israelis and blah, blah, blah. Okay. It says, quote, students have abandoned their classes to harass other students and disrupt campus-wide activities, including university commencement ceremonies nationwide. Enough is enough. Again, if an individual, first of all, if a university cancels a graduation, that's on the university administration's shoulders, and that's their fault. Shame on them. They're cowards just like everybody else is. That's their problem. That's a bad decision, but that's their problem. The business of any student being in a ceremony and disrupting it by yelling or protesting during the ceremony, they should just be arrested on the spot and removed. That's all. Because that's what would happen in any other public forum. That's the way that it works. You do that in a Walmart, you get hauled out. You do that in a wedding, you get hauled out. You do that at a funeral, you get hauled out. You do that at a circus, you get hauled out. A state fair, you get hauled out. I mean, I could go on and on. That's all. Just have more police there to arrest protesters. And you walk up to them one at a time, you stand them up, you cuff them, and you take them out. It's disorderly conduct because there's other things going on at the time that you're disrupting or creating a disorder in the normal conduct of things. But even so, sending them to Gaza, which no longer exists, this is wild. It says, quote, "That's why I introduced legislation to send any person convicted of unlawful activity on the campus of an American university since October 7th of 2023 to Gaza to complete a minimum of 6 months of community service." Weber added, "If you support a terrorist organization and you participate in unlawful activity on campuses, you should get a taste of your own medicine. I'm going to bet that these pro-Hamas supporters wouldn't last a day, but let's give them the opportunity." Well, that's funny. You talk about people supporting terrorist organizations and engaging in unlawful activity. Let's arrest you for being a tool of the Jewish lobby, and let's throw you over there and see how you feel. This is amazing. God, this guy's face, he looks like he's a sexual predator. This guy's done something with a kid. 100%. Has to be the case. It says the bill is likely to face uncertain odds in the House, where Republicans hold a razor-thin majority of just one seat. It says even if it passed, the Democrat-controlled Senate will almost certainly ignore it. It says it is an example, however, of the heightened tensions racking all over the United States over Israel's war with Hamas. Well, it's not just with Hamas. They're racially cleansing people. That's different. They're also getting rid of endless Palestinian Christians. And there are endless Palestinian Christians there. A ton of them. They're wiping them out too. But where's all the so-called Christians these days speaking out against this, in particular in Washington, D.C.? They're nowhere to be found. Again, you go back and watch the last war video, you're going to see Ted Cruz at the beginning of the video section licking the backside of Israel. It's disgusting. On Holocaust Remembrance Month, we should blah, 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 blah. We should stand with Israel always because they're our number one ally, and every other cliche thing he says. They got Ted Cruz with a kid too, ladies and gentlemen. I'm almost certain of it. Has to be the case. There's no way that you stand in a field with a camera in front of you to make sure that your message gets out there crystal clear, that you lick the backside of the Jewish lobby in Israel until your dying day without being blackmailed. There's no other explanation. So speaking of blackmailed individuals who's probably spent a time or two with a kid or a young gal, Josh Hawley, allegedly. This too again, and again, I know I'm going after Republicans right now, but we know they're two heads of the same snake. I could easily go after the other side, and I do all the time too. But either way, in this particular case, this was Josh Hawley on May 8th of 2024 here, and the Senate Judiciary Committee held a hearing about the DACA Dreamers and what should happen with all of them. Now, again, he specifically is questioning this Maria Pachenko, who is the president and chief executive officer at the Dream.us, about undocumented students participating in pro-Palestinian encampments. So give this a listen in 3, 2, 1, and then I'll come back on the end and provide my 2 cents. So here we go.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all of the witnesses for being here. Ms. Pacheco, if I could just start with you. Your organization, the Dream.us, you provide support for undocumented young people for college and career success. Is that broadly right? Am I getting it right?
That's correct.
And among the things you do is you provide scholarships to these undocumented students. Have I got that correct?
That's right.
And so college scholarships, just to be clear.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. Can you tell me, maybe you know the answer to this, maybe you don't, any of the students, do you know if any of the students to whom your organization has provided a college scholarship are currently part of the encampments on any of these college campuses? Like the picture you see behind me, I'm sure we've all seen these videos.
No, Senator.
Nobody to whom you provide scholarships are part of the encampments.
I do not know.
You don't know. What about, do you know if any of the students to whom you provided scholarships have physically threatened Jewish students on campus?
I do not know.
Here's why I'm asking. NBC News just reported, and I'm just going to quote now from the article, quote, this is Columbia University, a Columbia undergraduate who provided only her initials because she is an undocumented immigrant and fears deportation, said last week she spent hours a day in the encampment. This would be the illegal encampment that's in violation of the law as well as campus policy. Spent hours a day in the encampment, I'm quoting still now, before university officials threatened to suspend those students. The article goes on, she joined this student, joined a supplies platoon. That's a subgroup formed by pro-Palestinian campus organizers, end quote. Let me just review some of the things that these students, these in the encampments, that is, are saying. And of course, we often don't know who these students are. They're concealing their identities. This is, I'm going to read to you now, and I just warn folks, this is not pleasant stuff, but these are the facts, and we have to tell the truth. This is just from last night at George Washington University. That's here in this town. They projected the students in the encampment there projected onto various buildings images of the United States flag being burned with the graphics, "Gaza lights the spark that will set the empire ablaze." They projected the following: "Long live the student intifada. Down with the settler state." That would be the state of Israel, I suppose. "Glory to the martyrs of Palestine." It's a jihadist slogan. "Stained with the blood of 44,000 Palestinians." That's last night at GW. Also at GW, they're now calling for beheading, the student encampment, beheading of individuals who support the state of Israel, including holding a people's tribunal where they're putting on trial, quote unquote, various members of their own board of trustees and calling for a guillotine. Here's Columbia University students on April the 20th, 2024. This is all public record. I'm reading this now. This is on, I guess it's X. Columbia University students yelling at Jewish students, and I quote, "Never forget October 7th. It will not happen. It will happen. Not one more time, not 5 more times, not 10, not 100, not 1,000, but 10,000 times. The 7th of October is going to be every day for you." The 7th of October, this is to Jewish students, is going to be every day for you, end quote. I guess my question is, Ms. Pacheco, and for anybody else on the panel too, shouldn't we be deporting these students? If we have undocumented students who are here unlawfully in the country who are violating the law, let's just be clear here now. This is a violation of the law. And if they're also deliberately inciting persecution of a person on account of their race, which surely calling for the murder of Jews does that, shouldn't we be deporting them? Does anybody think we shouldn't be? Shouldn't we be deporting these students who are here unlawfully? Ms. Pacheco?
Senator, we expect a lot from our scholars, and the scholars and the students that I know love this country, respect this country, and want to and enrich not only the campuses, but also this country.
That's fantastic. And I hope and bet that none of the people that you sponsor are part of this. And I certainly hope that's the case. But I just wondered, is there anybody on the panel who thinks that we should not deport students who are here unlawfully, who are engaging in this activity, who are calling for the death of Jewish students, who are violating the laws of the United States? I mean, shouldn't we be deporting these people? Does anybody want to defend it and say, no, we shouldn't? They should absolutely be. I think it's indefensible. The record reflects there's total silence from the panel. I also think we ought to cancel the student visas. And I've called for this. For those who are here from other countries with a visa, I think if they're part of this, we ought to be canceling their visas. We ought to send a clear message. Actually, Ms. Pacheco, I think it was you in your opening statement put it really beautifully about how part of what we're talking here today represents the character of the country. I think that's very appropriate. And we need to send a message about this activity, not just about the trespassing and the destruction of buildings. That's bad. That's unlawful. But the threats of violence, and in some cases, the outright acts of violence against Jewish students, we should send a moral message that if you do that and you are here unlawfully, you should be deported. If you are here on a student visa, you ought to have your visa canceled. This is the United States of America. And we are not going to stand for it. And I would just hope we could speak with one moral voice on this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, again, I'm playing this for a variety of reasons, hypocrisy being the main one. Let me start with this. I'm not a fan of the DACA program in the slightest. I don't think foreign students should be in America. I think American students should be in American schools. That's my take. I'm very old school in that regard. I think that's the way that it should be. An individual, again, who is here on a school-related visa, I don't know, beat it. I'm not a lawyer, but with all of that said, the hypocrisy of Josh Hawley is blinding. If those were white students being threatened and being attacked, Congress, the Senate, and he himself wouldn't say a word, not a peep about it, because they don't, because they never do. Again, if it's about black students, which it rarely ever is, unless it was 4 years ago when that entire thing, of course, was completely manufactured, not to mention school was out of session during the whole Black Lives Matter thing, so the school element of all of it never even came into play. That's, of course, why they did it this year, this election year, 4 years later, in the school environment, regarding a political issue, because they wanted to get the student population involved. So they missed their opportunity back in 2020 because, remember, everybody was afraid of something that doesn't exist, and they were locking themselves down and leaving school and shutting down campuses and so on and so on. Which reminds me, just before I get back to Holly very quickly, there was a rumor about that was actually something that was done on purpose by the good guys because they were afraid that there would be rioting within the campuses themselves because they knew what the enemy had planned regarding a potential death in the future of a black person on the streets at the hands of cops or whatever. Because again, that happens every year all of the time. But the media was going to hone in on a particular event. The good guys got a hold of that intel, and they knew that they needed the college campuses shut down before that popped off. So I want to remind people of that was a theory that was out there as far as the whole, the actual warfare scheme of what was really taking place behind the scenes. With that aside, and back to Hawley, again, I'm not defending the behavior of vandalism, in particular illegals vandalizing particular things. I just find it very funny that if somebody references X or Twitter or a social media post as being a viable place to make reports on the record in a senatorial hearing, that they would be normally mocked. But if he does it, basically, then well, everybody needs to just believe it. I mean, he's reading X posts as if they're real. Jewish students are being threatened to have their heads cut off. I mean, that might be true. It's still the First Amendment. I mean, hell, Josh, we call for people to cut your head off all the time, too. Doesn't that happen on a daily basis on college campuses and social media and podcasts where people are calling for the executions of politicians all of the time? Metaphorically, of course. But we do it constantly. I mean, that's not unusual. So again, I just find the hypocrisy astounding. And like I said earlier, what if it happens to even Israeli students that are overseas, that come over here for schooling on a visa as a DACA participant or recipient? Are they going to be deported? Are they going to have their visas stripped from them and never allowed to come back? I mean, we know where they're going to draw the line. They're going to draw the line to make sure that everybody's discriminated against, and that the law and the boot of the law is on the neck and the back of the head of anybody who is not Jewish. And again, certainly, they're not going to touch the black population with a 10-foot pole, because again, I mean, look at the leeway they gave them during the Black Lives Matter nonsense and that entire manufactured riot over a non-police murder. We know exactly who owns them because you can clearly see who it is that they're favoring in their proposed legislation. Now, he's not, of course, proposing any legislation. I mean, he kind of is. He's making the suggestion, shouldn't we be deporting these people? I mean, yeah. If you're an illegal and you break the law, yes, you should be deported. Of course. I mean, I agree with that. But that goes across the board with everybody. That's with everyone, not just individuals who are pro-Palestinian, so to speak. That should be for everybody. But as we know, that's not really what he means. He means if you're waving a Palestinian flag and so on, well, then you should be deported, in particular if you're, again, a DACA recipient. Not to mention flashing images on buildings and whatever else. Well, that's freedom of expression, believe it or not. It's actually becoming, and has been rather, a rather popular form of freedom of expression. You send up a drone into the sky with a projector on it, with a pre-programmed message, flashing on the side of a building. You know, that's protected under the First Amendment. Unless, of course, it's being done on private property to some extent, and the private property owner doesn't want it on there, in which case, yeah, you can't do it. But if it's paid by the taxpayers, for example, like the side of a bridge, well then, yeah, I mean, that's fine. But, again, it's just the hypocrisy of the entire thing. Their own testimony in moments like this should show everybody that they're blackmailed and they're owned by the Jewish lobby. It's just more proof. And it's happening on a day in, day out basis now. It's ramping up massively. In fact, just recently, and this just happened as a matter of fact, Democrats in Congress just passed a bill, apparently. At least Republicans voted on this unanimously, it says. House Dems just voted unanimously to give illegals representation in Congress and the Electoral College. House seats and Electoral College votes will be added to areas with the most illegals, including all Biden illegals, unless Senate passes the bill. Invasion by design. It says Republicans, there were 206 yays. Let's see. And Democrats voted 202 against on the passage. So, okay, okay. So, again, all Democrats voted yes, and it looks like all but 11 were against this that were Republicans. There were 11 no votes among Republicans, 11 no votes among Democrats. Again, I don't see this going anywhere, but it doesn't help Republicans either. Again, they're all in this together. They're all just playing this political back and forth game, claiming that one side has the moral high ground as opposed to the other, but the fact is both sides are controlled. That's why nothing gets done. The only thing that gets done is both sides really just stepping on the throat of your average law-abiding American in the end. That's it. That's really the only thing that either side is concerned with. They want to look the best while they take our rights away from us. Again, I'm not defending the vandalism. Vandalism is a crime. Yes, if a DACA recipient, again, back to the Hawley thing real quick, again, if they are vandalizing, which clearly they are, and they have been, spray painting and 1,000 other things, then yes, you lock them up, you take them away, you look at their papers, and then you take their papers away and you put them on a plane and you send them out. I'm 100% fine with that. That doesn't bother me. They're breaking the laws, and to that degree, Hawley has a point. My whole point is that the hypocrisy is everywhere, and that there are multiple sides to that coin. And if he's only focusing on one side, well, I have a problem with that. Because again, if it's a Jewish student threatening something, what's going to happen to them? And what happens to anybody else, again, who threatens threatens white students? Then what? They get a raise? They get a promotion? They pass a class? I mean, what reward do they get? It's far more complicated than just a double standard. I mean, double standard's putting it mildly. This is a multi-sided die that gets thrown around on a constant basis. And usually the side that always ends upright, that everybody can see, is the one that is not just. So, there you go. My 2 cents on that. Okay. One last thing here real quick. Josiah Richwine just sent me this. Apparently the rapper Macklemore has this new song out there, and I watched the video, and it's got lots of facts in it. It's not all factually accurate, but there's plenty of facts in it. And I frankly just think that this is one of those interesting things, again, where every movement or riot in the future needs an anthem. And I'm not saying that this is that by any stretch, but popularizing particular things in the hands of the less knowledgeable is not always a good thing either. Again, this is a multi-dimensional war here. And unfortunately, people are still thinking in terms of black and white, or they're thinking in terms of right side or downside, so to speak, or left or right or whatever else. And none of that's accurate. Again, in the last war video, I play a book reading from an old C-SPAN episode, again from, I want to say 2006, if I'm not mistaken, where an older gentleman is describing the origination of Hamas, that the entire thing was funded by Israel. It was funded by Zionists, that they gave a leader in Palestine money so that he could win an election. He did, and then they gave him an army and gave him money to have an army, to then, of course, only infiltrate the army and have the army fire back toward Israel, and then there you have your quote-unquote Israel-Hamas conflict. The whole thing was purposefully staged and written by Jews. That was the entire origin of it, but no one's paying attention to that. Again, everybody's paying attention to how bad the cookies taste, but nobody's asking who baked them. It's kind of a problem, don't you think? I mean, these are questions that need to be asked and answered. Not just asked, but actually answered. So, I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting as to what happens, certainly in city areas. But, I think small towns, for the most part, are going to stay to themselves this summer and do what they do. But the college campuses are starting to empty out. Graduations are taking place or being canceled, and everybody's pretty much going their own way. But that's not to say that something couldn't pop off in a city. So, anyway, heads on a swivel regarding all that. Okay. Let me get into this now. And this is really, I'm shifting gears here and sort of closing out the education aspect of this particular episode. Then I have some jab-related stuff and jab-related audio to play later, but here's an 8-minute clip that I want to play. And I'm just going to set it up by saying this, and then I'm going to let the audio play and have you listen to this as objectively as you possibly can. This popped up on my feed, and I'm not signed into YouTube and don't have a YouTube channel or an account anymore. But I had no idea that there were so many YouTube channels filled with divorced moms and divorced women who then rush to YouTube to have a channel to either tell everybody that they're divorced or, I don't know, emotionally justify their divorce or whatever it may be. But this one, oddly enough, popped up in my feed, and I thought, okay, I'm seeing this more and more. What is it with all of these quote-unquote moms with YouTube channels with divorce in the title of what it is that they're doing? So this particular woman's YouTube page is titled 5 to Love. 5 to WTO, or TWO rather, I can spell. 5 to Love. And apparently their name is Jamie Scott. This is a woman who apparently has either 5 or 6 kids. Either way, I'm just going to play this, and I'm going to tell you, this is very revealing. And I'll come in on the other end and see if you can't, we'll compare notes. We'll just do that. Okay, we'll just compare some notes here and see if we're on the same wavelength regarding her own testimony here and what she has to say about her so-called divorce, which apparently did happen after 17 years of marriage with this many children. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, my wonderful friends. I am just going to film and be really, really honest here. In this vlog. I've had a lot of things on my mind these last few weeks, a lot of things in my personal life that I've been dealing with, and I will share some of those today. Some I may share at a later time. But I felt it necessary to respond to a recent vlog that was posted about why I personally chose divorce. And this is something that really only my support system knows, but I think at this point in time, it's okay to talk about it just a little bit. So I have been divorced, separated now for about 2 years. And at this point in time, I think you guys have figured out by now that the divorce was my decision. And it was not an easy decision to make, nor was it something that I ever thought that I would make that choice in life. But it was the best decision for myself and for my family. And right before we separated, we had visited Waco, Texas 4 times, and we were planning on visiting a 5th time because we had purchased 10 acres of property in Waco, Texas. And my husband at the time wanted to move there and homestead and pull our kids out of public schools and homeschool our kids. And I know nothing about homeschool. And we were just on different paths in what we wanted out of life. And we're married for 17 years, almost 18. And we were married when I was about 20 years old. And we both chose to start a family early. And in my family, that's not uncommon to get married a little bit younger and start a family. And in my faith, that's not something that's taught. It can sometimes happen across the board in various faiths. Anyway, long story short, our marriage did end in divorce after 17 years. And I can truly say I loved my husband. But we just didn't see eye to eye on several different things. And we emotionally regulate in different ways, and we were very different personalities. And I'm a very quiet and reserved type of gal. And so anyway, sometimes I think the most compassionate thing that we can do when we love someone is to let them go. And so that is the decision that I made. And it was the best decision, like I've said, for myself and for my children. And that is really all that I am going to comment on. I felt like as an audience for 2 years, I have had this question asked so many times, so many DMs about this, and people even asking, how do you know if divorce is right for you? And I would definitely recommend talking to a good friend. If you are thinking about that, there is always counseling services available, or speaking with an ecclesiastical leader. That can be very beneficial, very helpful with community resources to be able to talk to a professional about that. There are counseling services for marriage and family counseling sessions that you can attend as a couple. And in this particular situation, it was something that just wasn't going to work for us. Okay, so anyway, I just wanted to clarify some things in this particular video here. One other thing that people have brought up is you should put God first and you should think of your children. And I would just like to say that I have, and I always will. I always will put my relationship with God first and the love of my children first and foremost. The other thing I wanted to share and open up about today, if I can get a little bit vulnerable here, is the last few weeks, I have really been struggling with insomnia off and on. So lack of sleep, lack of appetite. I've been dropping weight like crazy. Like, what is this all about? And then the other thing I had been noticing in my life is I've lost like my sparkle or my zest for life. And these can all be signs of depression. And so I was keeping track of myself, like, okay, this is day 3, this is day 4, this is day 5, this is not going away. And so I did call up my counselor that I meet with every so often, and I actually hadn't been in 5 months. And so anyway, so I go in, and the first thing I said was like, these are my symptoms. I'm pretty sure this is what it is. And he was like, yes, you have a mild form of depression. And so he challenged me to do these 5 things every single day for the next 14 days and see if I don't feel better. And so I thought I would share, because they were really great things, with you guys today. So number 1, he said, I want you to exercise for 30 to 45 minutes every single day. And I was like, okay, that I can do. The second one is talk a lot. Don't go quiet and express yourself. So I think my sweet support system right now is like, wow, she has a lot of words. So express yourself a lot. And then the third is stay socially connected and participate. And one thing that I've been doing right now is volunteering in the classroom for my kids. And it's a great way to stay connected to my community, feel like I'm participating, contributing, helping to create or build something or teach. And so that's been really helpful right now. And the perks, I get to see my kids during the day when they're at school. So he did give me a couple quotes that I thought were fabulous that I was going to share with you guys. The first is, if your presence isn't making a difference, then your absence isn't going to matter. And this has been really helpful for me during this period of a few days here of what to say yes to and what to say no to. Some things it's just better to say no to. And so anyway, that was one quote. And then the second one was, leave so much of your good qualities. When you try to leave people, they beg you to tarry a little bit longer. And I thought this was really beautiful, is, opening your heart to others and sharing and giving in that way. I think that's quite beautiful. And number 4 is have something to look forward to every morning and every evening. So for me right now, I look forward to going outside and getting a walk daily. And the second is decorating my home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. So that just really sparks joy for me right now. And then the 5th and last thing is service. So get outside of yourself every single day. So those are the 5 things that I'm going to be working on over the next week and a half here. And then I'll be checking back in with the great counselor that I see right now. Anyway, if you are noticing these signs in yourself or symptoms in yourself or a loved one, definitely have that conversation, do a check-in. If you have a partner, speak with them, or a best friend, ecclesiastical leader, or go in and get yourself some therapy or counseling. I think it's a fabulous gift to give of oneself and to be able to heal. So anyway, I love you guys. I hope you know how grateful truly I am for your love, support, and kindness along the way. I hope you will stay tuned for more fabulous content as I share these small moments of joy with my family. And I will catch you guys next vlog. Yeah. I am headed out for my daily 30 to 45 minutes of exercise. And this is so great for me to clear my mind, regulate my emotions of the day. And it really helps me to reset and wind down so that I can sleep every night. Right now, I love walking. I would love to be able to run at some point, but it's more like a run walk for 5 minutes off and on because I'm just not there yet. But it feels so great to get outside, get some fresh air, be out in nature. And living in Southern Utah is just beautiful this time of year. It's still quite warm and I'm wearing shorts because I sweat so much when I'm exercising, but it just feels really great to get outside. And I look forward to this every single day.
Okay, here we go. Deep breath. I think we're on the same wavelength here. I sure hope you picked up on it. You know my threshold for hypocrisy is about 0. I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to laugh. It's just okay. Let me just get into it here. I want to preface this by saying a few things. First of all, someone would say, of course, well, Sean, why are you playing this and what have you? I find this to be, again, from a YouTube standpoint, a interesting phenomenon of divorced women, again, having channels on YouTube. This is not new. I fully understand that it isn't new. And that there's a quote-unquote community of women out there who do this. And there's probably the same thing with men, okay? Again, I'm going to say that I've never been married. I've never been divorced. I don't know what either are like. I probably never will, and that's 100% fine. With that said, I'm certain I never wanted to get divorced. So at least I've got that going for me because that's not on my resume. But with that said, I understand that people get divorced for very valid reasons. I also understand that people get divorced for very selfish reasons. You get where I'm going with this. I want to bring up and just go through what she said point by point and then try to point out what she said and then just kind of highlight a few things. First of all, she was married for almost 18 years. Her children are what appear to be elementary school age. It looks like she has a son who is a bit older, certainly I would say teenage, of teenage age, but the rest all look relatively very young. Got married in their 20s, and she openly claimed it was her decision. Now, you heard her reasons why. They would vacation in Waco, Texas. They would buy land in Waco, Texas as a family. All indicators that the husband was the breadwinner and that the husband is spending money on land to ultimately live there with his family from Utah down to Texas to live off of the land, grow food, and homeschool. And that this is what he was interested in doing. And she quickly disclosed, as you heard her say, well, I know nothing about homeschooling, so that was out of the picture, or whatever term she used. You also heard her use the term, which is a leftist psychological term, emotionally regulate. And you've heard me bring that phrase up before, because that's a term that's worked its way even into the K-12 and university school systems among everyone. Students all the way up to school board members, they'll say the word regulate. And this is interwoven within counseling, education, and 1,000 other things. This never existed. But this is a dead verbal giveaway that someone is being counseled by somebody who is in that system and in that wavelength of thought, of excuse making. She openly admitted that counseling wouldn't work, and that she was again the one who initiated the divorce, that it was her decision, because what her husband had planned and wanted for their family was not what she wanted, so she said, in particular, pulling their children out of the public school system and having them homeschooled on their own private property in Waco, Texas, that they have been purchasing for years now. I want to throw in this sidebar too. The reason I'm bringing this up is because when I was a school teacher, and I've written about this at length, the business of marriage and divorce and the impact on children. When children are involved, regardless of age, it's remarkably hard. In particular, the younger they are. And there's ample research out there to prove that fact. With that said, it doesn't make it easier because the children are older. Betrayal is betrayal, lying is lying, and abandonment is abandonment. And that's a big, big deal. And that impacts everyone. In fact, it can cause an individual to go in one of two directions. They'll either double down on their loyalty and ensure that the individuals that they are with are loyal to the very end no matter what, because let's face it, that's what till death do you part means, through richer or poor, through sickness and through health, so on and so on. But then, of course, there are others that go in the opposite direction where they become emotionally reckless. They become sexually promiscuous. They become engaging in, they engage in drug use. They surround themselves with complete strangers when they wouldn't normally, or they'll even isolate to the point of abandonment of who they could potentially be. And then they fall down this pit of despair and a mental and emotional decline, which can lead to suicide as a child. This happens also. So that's why I'm bringing this up, because I've written about this at length. And when I heard her talking, I heard nothing but hypocrisy in her voice. And the main hypocritical part for me was this, and I have more bullet points, but the overarching part for me is this. And I said it out loud when I first heard her say it. She openly is open, as she even states, to learning new things as long as her therapist says it, but not her husband. Her husband was literally attempting to pull their family away from evil, from corporations and materialism and the public school system that brainwashes people. And he lost that battle. Now, that shouldn't be a battle, but it's only a battle in the minds of someone who is not awake. And she clearly isn't. She comes off, in my impression of her, she comes off as being very selfish, very self-absorbed, that she's the one that has it all figured out, that it's her way or the highway. She initiated the divorce. Her kids are still in public school. They trade their kids off whenever they trade their kids off back and forth, and those kids will now be damaged for the rest of their lives because their parents believe the opposite of how they as children should be raised. There, of course, is also something, again, to trying to pre-plan this as much as you can in the future, but at the exact same time, there's something to be said about growing throughout a relationship to the point where an individual understands, wait a minute, the world around us is dangerous. It's our job to shield our children as a couple and as a married couple and as a mom and a dad away from these environments, which you've heard me speak about with regularity. Why is it that they don't instantly say the school environment is bad? Look what's happening in the world. Look what's happening in our country. Our children don't deserve this. And then pulling them out. Only the brainwashed would leave them in. And she's proving that among the two of them, in my humble opinion, that she is the one who is not awake. But she doesn't have any problem trying new things and learning new things and stepping out of her comfort zone and doing stuff she's never done and socializing in a way she never has before. Unless, of course, a therapist tells her. She, of course, also stated, if I didn't already say it, that she recommends counseling, but counseling wasn't going to work for our relationship. Well, I have a pretty good idea as to why that's the case. It's because most marriage counselors typically back the female in many cases like this, in particular, certainly in ones like this, where it's the male who is the awake individual and saying, I want to protect my wife and my family as a protector and a provider, and the other one doesn't recognize that because the other one is status quo. The other one is run-of-the-mill, let's just keep doing the things that, everybody else seemingly is doing, when in fact that's not true at all. This relationship is wrecked. The family's destroyed because this woman, again, is incapable of learning things from her own husband, who again, she loved and he loved her, clearly. They had to have, in order to have that many kids and be married that long, and certainly at that age. But then, again, to just be like, I don't want to do this because I don't know anything about it. But my therapist told me to do things that I've never done, so I'll do those instead. You have to be kidding. Then she brought up again how she thought that you should put God first and your kids second. Well, what about your husband? Where does he fit in that? The guy who's trying to save your whole family from corruption and indoctrination. Again, I don't know if there was abuse in the relationship or not. I'm not a relationship therapist. I'm simply looking at this because this is a woman who didn't want to learn new things from her husband, in particular, I should say, when it, of course, came to the raising of their children and saving their children from this system. She also, of course, described the numerous symptoms associated with depression. Well, why is that? It's not because she's free from something that was enslaving her. That's what a left-wing therapist would say, and she, of course, referred to him as a he. So we're talking about a male therapist. So she's listening to a sympathetic male therapist who's giving her advice, which frankly is advice that she wants to hear. Which means he has a client now forever. As long as he keeps giving her things that she nods her head with, she'll keep going back. So he's got her forever. It shouldn't be that way. There shouldn't be therapists. There should just be communication between a man and a woman and why they want to do the things that they do and explain the existential reasons for it. But she claims that God comes first and that kids come second. And I thought to myself, where's the dad come in? Where does he come in all of this? She talked about having insomnia as depressive symptoms. Again, a lot of those symptoms can be a disconnection from reality. Sometimes that's a good thing, like back when I had depression a long time ago. That was a good thing. I was disconnecting from the matrix. But in her case, it could be because it's regret. I mean, I remember a long time ago, you might say this isn't a comparison, Sean, but a long time ago, I bought a big screen, flat screen TV when they were kind of like the latest rage. Again, this was a long time ago. This was whatever it was, 14 years ago at least. And I went into a Best Buy and I spent $1,000 on this television. And I had the money, but it was too expensive. And I bought it and I was like, yeah, I got a 55-inch flat screen. This is great. Keep in mind, I was a dope back then. But either way, I bought it. And as I was rolling it out to the car, I thought to myself, I made a huge flipping mistake here. I don't need this. I was overwhelmed with regret and buyer's remorse, which is just regret. And I thought to myself, again, wait a minute. I don't need this big of a TV. I just want to watch the occasional football game, maybe turn on the news, and then that'll be the end of it. And watch a movie from time to time, but that's it. So I slept on it, and I didn't get a wink of sleep that night. I was awake all night, and I thought to myself, I've got the receipt, the TV's in the box. I need to return it because I saw a smaller television for half the price, and that's all I'll need. And I took it back the next day. In fact, it was the first thing I said and the first thing I did. I just took it back and I got the other one that was smaller and cheaper and I could afford it and that was fine. But again, that's a television. That's a material object. She's having insomnia over the destruction of her relationship that apparently she was responsible for. She was the one who didn't want to grow in the relationship, but that's what relationships are about. That's what I thought anyway. Apparently she didn't. Apparently she thought it was her way or the highway. I don't know. Maybe she thinks that about him. I'm not entirely sure. Again, I don't know the full background. I'm just trying to point out again the hypocrisy in all of this. I find it astounding that men and or women, I would say, and again, I'm not knocking women in this. That's not what this is. It's just I find it interesting because, again, I'm certain women are like listening to this right now saying, geez, that woman is a crazy person. And you might be correct. But either way, I just find it interesting that she's willing to take advice from a complete stranger, but not someone that she's known since she was 20. That's an odd one. Let's see. Again, the hypocrisy, too, of her saying that the counselor, this complete stranger, said that she needs to stay connected, that she needs to build things, that she needs to teach or learn new things and then socialize with her kids. I thought that's what the husband wanted too. I thought that's what he wanted on their own land, to build things, to socialize and teach their own children. There was a line there too where she said something like, the counselor told her that if you're present in a situation but you're not emotionally invested, then it's better for you to not even be there than to be there. I disagree with that completely. In particular, when you're talking about the relationships with your children and or your husband. Presence matters. It's a huge deal. And people have to, again, understand what's happened with quote-unquote therapy over the years. Therapy, by and large, is the justification of sin. That's why the vast majority of the psychology profession is fraudulent, because it's the justification of sin. Oh, you're being sinful in a relationship because you don't want to do something, or you don't want to learn, or you don't think that your other partner has your best interests in heart, or XYZ. Well, here's why. And here's a list of reasons and excuses and names and rationalizations as to why that's the case. That is beyond destructive. But that right there is the Marxist Jewish lobby satanic control over that profession. And that's its goal. Its goal is to destroy the nuclear family. This woman doesn't know that. She doesn't know that she's just been taken advantage of by Satan. In particular, again, I want to preface this. I don't know any of the other background in their relationship. At face value, you heard it just like I did. I guarantee she doesn't know that she's being taken advantage of by quote unquote feminism. And that pill has been swallowed by the vast majority of couples counselors. That's the point. That's how they stay in business. They don't stay in business by keeping people together. They stay in business by preying on individuals who are apart and then justifying their decisions and their behavior as to why they're apart. So this woman is beyond help, I think. This isn't good. And then there was this last one, which again, remarkably hypocritical, where she openly stated that her therapist told her, or her counselor told her, to get outside of yourself every single day. In essence, learn something new and grow every single day. The hypocrisy is overwhelming, because it sounds like, at face value, that's what her husband wanted for her. But she said no. But a complete stranger, after the destruction of her marriage, says, yes, this is what you should do. She agrees with it. And she can't make the connection that maybe that's what her husband was saying in the first place. I just wanted to play that for you and give you my analysis on that, because this right here is quite literally a drop in the bucket of what's going on in our country. This is the brainwashing, the destruction of the nuclear family, the justification for all of that, the immoral, satanic justification for all of that. Do you really think that this is what God would want? Is a mother to destroy a marriage and a relationship with her husband and then ruin their children for years to come? Because why? Because dad wanted to move to southern Texas and live in Waco on land that they purchased with their entire family and live happily ever after? It's sad. It's I don't know what else to say. It's just sad. So I'm going to tell you, if you get on YouTube and you type in the word divorce, or I'm divorced, or we're now divorced, the overwhelming channels that exist is just that. It's overwhelming. Very overwhelming. And again, it's sad. I feel terrible for their children. I feel bad for the husband. Never even met the guy. I feel bad for her too. She doesn't know what she's doing. She doesn't know what she's done. Again, not knowing the full picture, I have no idea. But it seems strange. That's my take anyway. Okay. Jab-related things. And I'll tell you, I had a lot of audio I want to play, and I do want to play this, though. In fact, I'll save a piece of this audio for Monday, because it's very good. But I do want to play Reiner Fuellmich in his audio here. I haven't brought this up on the show previously, but Reiner Fuellmich Again, this was the German doctor slash lawyer, if I'm not mistaken. He's one or the other. I think he may have a PhD even. I'm not entirely sure his full credentials, but he is a doctor and of some kind. Anyway, he was the individual who held the so-called COVID tribunal, so to speak, where he brought in professionals to talk about how, again, this, people's rights were being violated, and it was violating the Geneva Convention and the Nuremberg Code, and he had lawyers there and guests speaking over Zoom over numerous parts of the country, and so on and so on. And I brought that to people's attention here on the show, and I enjoyed his work as an educational piece. But I also said, if anybody thinks that this is going to be some kind of a real tribunal, it isn't. It was a faux tribunal, but I understood what he was doing. He was gathering information to basically be able to present to someone to say, look, here are the crimes that have committed, and here's what you've done. As a result of all of his hard work and the work of the people around him, he was sent to jail. He was arrested in Mexico, and he was sent to jail back in Germany where he lives, and he's been incarcerated, I believe, since, I want to say 3 months ago, if I'm not mistaken. He has been getting on the telephone and releasing 15-minute audio clips of him talking about what's going on and a number of other things regarding worldwide events. And his last message was here from April 29th of 2024, and it's 12 minutes long. I played it at the last tail end of the last war video, and I want to play it here on the show out of respect for him and his hard work and everything that he's done. So here's what I'll do. I'm going to close out the episode with his comments and leave it at that. It speaks for itself. He's 100% right. He's been unlawfully detained. He's a prisoner of war, as far as I'm concerned, in this war that we are in, for telling the truth and exposing the lies. He thinks that there's a bright side to all of this at the end, certainly. But again, he's been unlawfully detained, again, for telling the truth and gathering information, and this alone should show people that the enemy's back is against the wall on the crimes that they have committed, and these are the largest crimes in humanity, justifying a fake illness and a fake pandemic to usher in a biological weapon under the guise of a preventative medicine. So God bless Reiner Fuellmich, and give this a listen, and I will catch you on Monday. Thanks for listening again.
Dear friends, with this statement, I want to tell you that there are more and more reasons for us to be optimistic. At least outside this prison cell, where I've been held in captivity for more than 6.5 months now, it is now not only palpable that the tide has turned, but it is both clearly visible and clearly audible. At the same time, this worldwide development in the right direction is mirrored by what is happening in my case, except that last week, an alarming twist in this never-ending story shows how now pressure is being put on the court by the intelligence services, and that one of my attorneys is receiving anonymous threats, which quite obviously come from that very same source. But let me first tell you about the positive developments that we can now clearly see and hear happening worldwide. As I already mentioned, it looks like my work, first at the Corona Investigative Committee and then at ICIC, has been vindicated by the publication of the, albeit heavily redacted, RKI papers. RKI is the equivalent of the American CDC. These papers clearly show that Corona was not a pandemic, but a staged plandemic set in motion by the mainstream media, politicians, and others who got paid to induce panic among the population so that they could be controlled and made to destroy their own economy and their own health. On top of these now infamous RKI papers, the highly regarded former president of Germany's highest court, the Constitutional Court, Professor Papier, for months has now been asking for a judicial investigation of what happened during Corona, stating that the judiciary, and above all, Germany's highest court, the Constitutional Court, failed to protect the rights and values enshrined in the Constitution during Corona. Well, we can certainly help with this judicial investigation as we have all the evidence readily available. Anyone can easily download all the interviews I have conducted with, for example, Dr. Mike Eden, the former vice president of Pfizer, Professor Luc Montagnier, who won a Nobel Prize for discovering the HIV virus and then changed his mind, and like Dr. Judy Mikovits said, that it wasn't a virus that caused AIDS. I conducted interviews with presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Archbishop Vigano, Professor Sushrit Bhakti, Dr. Peter Breggin, former Premier of Newfoundland Labrador Brian Peckford, ritual abuse survivor Cassie O'Brien, and many, many others. It's all there. But there is, in fact, even more reason for optimism, as outside of Germany, the wake-up process has picked up so much speed that it is now unstoppable. Those on the other side of the fence, in particular those who are in the business of panic and warmongering, have now every reason to panic themselves. At Columbia University in New York, reminiscent of what happened 55 years ago, students, that's during the Vietnam War, student protests against the Vietnam War have now spread in its variation of protests against what's happening in Gaza, have now spread across the entire country and then worldwide. Once again, it is students and faculty members of Columbia University who are protesting against a war, this time the war in Gaza. More than 34,000 people were killed over the last 6 months, 70% of whom are women and children. And now 2 mass graveyards were found with more than 300 bodies of patients and medical staff of hospitals, many of whom showing signs of torture and execution-style murder. Neither the U.S. administration nor the EU is able to ignore this. Both have asked for an independent investigation into the massacres. The student protests have already spread to other countries, like, for example, Australia, and students and faculty members are now coordinating their efforts and connecting with each other. Sounds like real grassroots bottom-up democracy, standing up against globalistic, top-down totalitarianism to me. The protesters demand not just that the killing stops immediately, but they also ask, cui bono? Who profits from all this? In what ways? This means that just like during Vietnam, the protesters are breaking through the official wall of propaganda and want to get to the bottom of what's going on. Only this time, for real, it seems. Because I believe it is no accident that the calls for an investigation of these crimes against humanity coincide with the calls for an investigation into the corona crimes against humanity. The people on the other side of the fence are only one step short of the realization that the same puppets in the mainstream media politics and pseudoscience who got paid to lie to us about corona are now lying to us about Gaza. And from that realization will come follow-up questions, such as, for example, what is really going on in Ukraine, and what exactly is it with man-made global warming? And why are they trying to keep us in permanent panic mode? Good questions, don't you think? The positive developments are mirrored or reflected by what's happening in the criminal proceeding against me, except that here their panic is so great that they're now pushing themselves and the rule of law into very, very dangerous territory. On the one hand, their official narrative has collapsed. Both the hearing and the, albeit incomplete, that is illegally redacted contents of my file have shown beyond a reasonable doubt My taking a loan in order to protect some of the donations temporarily from imminent attachment of our bank account was perfectly okay, as I had both the authority to do this under the business judgment rule, and I was willing and capable of repaying the loan. The allegations in the criminal complaint to the contrary were simply freely invented lies, which the DA would have immediately uncovered had he conducted a real investigation and not just a fake one. The senior district attorney, who refused to even start a criminal investigation when she looked at the very same facts less than a half a year ago, or a half a year earlier, was correct when she came to the conclusion that there was absolutely no evidence of any criminal wrongdoing. But behind this travesty of justice, we can now see the real criminals. The three attorneys from Berlin and the assistant district attorney who cooperated very closely when they first had me kidnapped in Mexico and then got their hands on my money and the Corona Investigative Committee's money by way of fraud and extortion. Even my illegally redacted file shows that the assistant DA knew right from the start of his non-investigation that I was in the process of repaying the loan with the proceeds from the sale of my house, and that there was way more than enough money available for this. The file also shows that he knew full well that the three accusers had absolutely no right whatsoever to get their hands on that purchase price. And the file shows that he knew that the three authors of the criminal complaint would nevertheless engage in fraud and extortion in order to get their hands on that money. In fact, the criminals themselves kept him informed about their criminal activities. He not only allowed them to commit these crimes, rather there's now reasonable cause for a criminal proceeding against him for aiding and abetting their crimes, or at the very least for obstruction of justice. And those are real crimes, not just misdemeanors. But the matter gets worse. In full knowledge of the fact that the three criminals' only interest in the Corona activity, in the Corona Committee's activities focused on the donations it received for my work mostly, and knowing also, of course, that they had already stolen 1.15 million euros of my purchase price, he now attached my attorney's pension plan, collecting everything up to another 700,000 euros for these three criminals. But what is the reason for all this? Well, the secret dossier on me written by the German intelligence services proves beyond any reasonable doubt that the three Berlin attorneys and the assistant DA were instructed to do a kind of a hit job, to do the dirty work, so to speak, for those who are pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Ultimately, of course, this will backfire, as this will turn out to be a hit job on themselves and before the eyes of the world, a hit job on the rule of law in Germany. Why am I saying this? Well, last week, the intelligence services approached the presiding judge and his number two judge on the panel in my case and put them under pressure to, or at least they manipulated them. As a result of this, presiding judge just informed us that despite all the evidence to the contrary, he will definitely find me guilty of whatever crimes. If any further proof was required to show that this is a fake trial that undeniably started with my kidnapping in Mexico, here it is. My attorney, Dr. Miseray, who defends me in this trial alongside my colleague Katja Verma, just received an anonymous letter with a photo of his daughter. Clearly a threat that something will happen to her if he continues to defend me. I will publish the details of all of this, still still unfolding crime story in my next statement. For now, let me conclude not with another list of my favorite songs, but by telling you that my favorite book is Harper Lee's novel To Kill a Mockingbird. And my favorite movie is the movie by the same name starring Gregory Peck. There will be justice, and if the system is too corrupt to deliver it, it'll come another way. Call it karma or poetic justice, but it will come. See you soon.
Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.